So, picture this. I'm at my brother's wedding, right? And out of nowhere, my dad, in front of everyone, calls me an uneducated spinster who's only good for my money. Yeah, it hurt a lot. But here's the thing. I didn't just sit there. I took the microphone, canceled my six-figure gift, and let's just say, I set a trap. By the end of that day, my entire entitled family was in for a shock they never saw coming. I was lying in my bedroom, and honestly, it was kind of pathetic. 3 days of fever, chills, and coughing so hard it felt like my ribs were going to shatter. The humidifier was a steady thrum in the background, and it was the only thing keeping the silence from feeling oppressive. At 36, I had built a multi-million-dollar logistics company from scratch. I'd navigated supply chain collapses, corporate sabotage, the whole mess. But in that moment, I was just fragile, weak, vulnerable. My body felt like it had been drained of every ounce of strength I had accumulated over the years. And emotionally, I was just raw. And yet, even in that state, I was alone. Totally alone. There was no one hovering, no one worrying, no one even checking in beyond the polite text messages I had sent earlier. The world had shrunk to that humidifier and the groaning floorboards of my apartment. Then, my phone buzzed on the nightstand, and my first thought was, okay, that's probably Brandon, maybe just checking in on me. Maybe he's panicked about some last-minute wedding detail. Maybe it's nothing. Right, I reached out with this trembling hand, the IV port still bruised on my wrist from my recent hospital stay, and pressed play on the voicemail. And oh, I wish I hadn't. What I heard first was the clinking of crystal glasses. You know, the kind that sound delicate, refined, but also obnoxiously rich. That's when Victor's laugh came through my father. Even at 62 retired, trying to hold on to some illusion of high society. That laugh, it had that condescending edge, the kind that tells you you're beneath them even if they don't say it outright. I froze, and then the words. My father talking about me. About how I would sign the check for the caterer before I crocus from whatever bug I had caught. That's right, he literally said that. My throat went dry. My lungs forgot to work for a second. I think even the cough subsided, just out of sheer shock. Cash bar at the wedding couldn't happen. Reputation, he said. Their precious, inflated sense of reputation. And here I am, laying in bed, sick, vulnerable, and apparently nothing more than an ATM. Then Brandon's voice came through. Breezy, casual, like he was talking about the weather. Relax, Dad. She'll sign it. Sophia is so desperate to feel like she's part of a real family. Wait, did he just say desperate for me to pay for their wedding? For inclusion in family photos, my hands shook. My chest felt like it was about to cave in. And then Lydia. Oh God, Lydia. Her tone was sharp, calculating, and dripping with disdain. She described me, yes, me, her future sister-in-law, as no college degree, no husband, no social grace, just a sad, bloated bank account. And they all laughed about it. My money, my life, my sacrifices, reduced to a punchline in a private joke that somehow had found its way into my ears. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. For a moment, I didn't even hear the humidifier. I had given them everything. My youth, my personal freedom, my education, my career, all of it had been sacrificed to make sure they never went without. My father's debts paid, Brandon's artistic ventures funded, and this was the truth of how they saw me. A sad, uneducated wallet. That was it. No gratitude, no acknowledgement of the years of silent sacrifice, no love. Just numbers on a page, and that hurt worse than the pneumonia ever could. The next morning, the fever finally broke, leaving me with a sharp, crystalline clarity, the kind that doesn't let you ignore anything. I dragged myself out of bed, wrapped in a blanket, sipping lukewarm tea, trying to make sense of the emotional carnage of the night before. And then the front door chimed. Brandon. He walked in, shoes clicking, designer shoes, which I had paid for, of course, looking vibrant and completely unconcerned. No soup, no flowers, no inquiry about how I was feeling. Just him, and a thick manila folder tucked under his arm. "Hey, Soph," he said casually, barely looking at me, grabbing a bottle of sparkling water from the fridge. I tried to muster some strength in my voice, a little pale, still fighting off that cold. I rasped, mentioning the pneumonia, trying to remind him, gently, that I was actually very sick. He waved it off, like it was nothing, dropped the folder on my lap. $60,000 in invoices. Just like that. On top of the deposits I had already covered, and he expected me to just log into my account and pay, as if I were some clerk in his little imaginary world of entitlement. I tested him. $60,000, Brandon. Can this wait until tomorrow? The sigh that followed was almost cartoonish in its exaggeration, this deep, heavy sigh that screamed inconvenience more than any concern for a sick sister. He leaned back, crossed his arms, and told me not to make this difficult. Lydia was stressed. The florist and string quartet needed payment, and I had promised to handle it. 2 minutes, he said. 2 minutes to solve their entire problem, while I was barely upright. And that's when it hit me. The warmth rising in my chest wasn't fever. It was anger. Pure, unadulterated rage. This was the son I had raised, the boy I had protected, the one I had financially and emotionally shielded from every hardship. And he had become this entitlement personified. And it wasn't just Brandon, it was Victor. It was Lydia, all of them, seeing me as nothing more than a resource, an endless wallet. I sat there, staring at the folder, hands trembling. And for the first time in years, I realized that their respect, their affection, their supposed love, they had all been illusions. Just a narrative they had constructed to justify taking and using what was mine. I replayed the voicemail in my mind over and over. Each laugh, each casual dismissal, each sharp barb from Lydia, and my mind, still foggy from the illness, began to sharpen. The betrayal wasn't just shocking, it was clarifying. Every sacrifice, every late night, every missed opportunity for myself. It had been for monsters masquerading as family. And that, well, that lit a fire I didn't know I still had inside me. Anger, yes, but also focus, clarity, a cold, calculated understanding that now, finally, I can see the entire board, and I held the winning pieces. The door chimed, and I knew instantly it was Brandon. I'd given him a key years ago, trusting him completely, and here he was, walking right in without knocking. The sound of his designer shoes clicking against the hardwood made me flinch a little. He looked completely healthy, vibrant even, and yet like clockwork totally self-absorbed. No flowers, no check-in, nothing. Just him, with this thick manila folder tucked under his arm. "Hey, Soph," he said, casual, like he wasn't barging into a sick sister's home. I rasped out, still weak. mentioning the pneumonia, trying to make him pause, make him care, but he waved me off, dropping the folder right into my lap, and inside $60,000 in invoices. Just like that. And he expected me to log in and pay right there. Like I was some sort of administrative assistant to his little life. My chest tightened. My hands shook. I felt every bit of that anger rising slowly, like this smoldering fire that had been dormant under the fever, under the vulnerability. And now it was catching flame. $60,000 while I was bedridden. No concern for me. Not a flicker. Not even a thought about the hospital. The IV port still bruised on my wrist. The cough that made my ribs ache like broken glass. Nothing. Just entitlement, packaged neatly in that manila folder. I looked at him, trying to find even a hint of guilt. Some acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, he shouldn't be dumping this on his sick sister. And there was nothing, just impatience, expectation, arrogance. I whispered, $60,000, Brandon. That is enormous. I'm quite sick. Can this wait until tomorrow? And his sigh, God, it was exaggerated, so heavy, like the weight of the world rested on him because I dared to ask for a delay. He leaned against the sofa, arms crossed, and said, almost like he was lecturing me, Sophia, please don't make this difficult. Lydia is stressed. Dad is fielding calls. The wedding, just log into your banking portal and send it. It'll take 2 minutes. 2 minutes. He spoke to me not as a sister, not even as family, but like I was some office clerk with a keyboard. The audacity, the sheer audacity made my stomach twist. And yet, as the initial shock wore off, I felt something else. Not fear, not resignation. No. This was clarity. My anger was rising. Yes, but it wasn't wild or uncontrolled. It was precise, cold, and burning with focus. I looked at the man in front of me, the one I had shielded from every hardship, the one I had given everything to, and I realized I had created this creature of entitlement, this spoiled, self-absorbed adult who had no concept of empathy, of gratitude, of family. And it wasn't just him. It was Victor. It was Lydia. It was a whole web of people who had convinced themselves that my love, my sacrifice, my money was theirs to command. The realization hit me like a thunderclap. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't weak. I had spent years building the infrastructure of their lives. I had the power. I just hadn't acknowledged it. My hands rested on the folder, feeling the weight not of the invoices, but of the truth. They thought my love, my compliance, my patience made me blind. They were wrong. I closed the folder carefully, masking the storm that was brewing inside me. My voice, soft but firm, finally broke through. Leave the folder here, Brandon. I will take care of the financial arrangements before the wedding. And for a moment, I watched him. His face brightened instantly. His goal was achieved, or so he thought. He grabbed his water, waved a perfunctory goodbye, and walked out, letting the heavy door slam shut behind him. Silence, absolute silence. And in that silence, I felt it, the shift. The sickness and vulnerability were still there. Sure, but beneath it was steel, a razor-sharp clarity. They had underestimated me. They assumed weakness. They assumed compliance. And they had forgotten one essential thing. I knew exactly how much power I held. And for the first time, I allowed myself to feel it fully. That burning heat of rage that had bubbled up in the voicemail. now sharpened and focused, gave me this almost terrifying calm. I wasn't going to be just the sister, the bank, the background support anymore. Not anymore. Not after this. I sat there, wrapped in a blanket, the folder heavy in my lap, and let the weight of realization sink in. I wasn't just hurt or sick or exhausted. I was awake. And awake meant I could plan, I could respond, I could control the game they thought they were playing. And that's when the first seeds of strategy began to sprout. Anger was no longer chaotic, it was fuel. I could almost feel the lines on the chessboard of their lives, the pieces all moving exactly where I wanted. And Brandon, he had no idea. Victor, he had no idea. Lydia, she was already a threat, but even she had no idea. They had assumed weakness. They had assumed I would pay, I would comply, I would bend under the stress. And yet, here I was, trembling still from illness. Yes, but with a mind as sharp as it had ever been, seeing the paths, the options, and the leverage I had quietly amassed. I leaned back, hands on the folder, letting my gaze wander to the city outside, quiet and indifferent. And in that moment, I made a decision, not impulsively, not out of rage alone, but with full understanding of the stakes and my power. I would not be taken advantage of anymore. I would not let them continue to view me as a wallet. This anger, this clarity, it wasn't just emotion, it was a blueprint. I would act, and they would learn very quickly that the sister they had mocked, the woman they thought of as nothing more than a financial instrument, had been in control all along. To really understand why I was so angry so perfectly, coldly angry, you need to know the backstory. I wasn't always this calculating. Once, I was just a kid trying to keep my family afloat. When I was 20, halfway through my sophomore year of college, my father, Victor, got himself fired from a mid-level management job. Not because of layoffs, not because of the economy, no. He got fired because of his own arrogance and his total inability to adapt. Rather than accept a smaller role or some demotion, he threw a tantrum. Spectacular, really. Our family was on the brink of losing everything. The house, the car, basic necessities, it was all teetering on the edge. And me, I made a choice that would change my entire life. I dropped out of college. Yeah, I walked away from my education because if I didn't, we would have lost it all. I took a brutal entry-level job at a shipping warehouse, 80-hour weeks, learning logistics from the ground up, literally from the inside out. I pushed, hustled, learned every detail, and eventually I launched my own brokering firm. It was grueling, exhausting, and sometimes terrifying, but it worked. I saved the family home, paid for groceries, paid for Brandon's private art school because Victor insisted his son was a creative genius who shouldn't be burdened with student loans. And over the years, the story twisted. Victor spun the narrative to his friends, to the world. He painted me as impatient, greedy, uneducated, and Brandon the golden child, the sophisticated, cultured pride of the family. And I accepted this role, quietly, because I believed family meant unconditional support. I believed that what I was doing, the silent work, the unglamorous sacrifice was love. Then came Lydia. Brandon met her about a year ago, and from the start, she accelerated every toxic dynamic in our family. She was 30, flawless, ambitious in the vacuous world of social media, claiming to be some digital wellness curator. And here's the weird part. She didn't care about me personally. She didn't even care about Brandon, really. She cared about the money, my money. From the moment she realized the extent of my assets, she saw me as an obstacle, and she mapped out exactly how to get around me. I remember the dinner 3 months ago, clear as day. I tried to be kind, to bond, to include her in the family. I prepared a beautiful meal, set the table, made the effort. She came in, fingers gliding over the artwork, the furniture, inspecting everything. Not a hello, not a question about my work or my life, just appraisal, assessment. And then she started asking about legal documents, twirling a piece of asparagus on her fork. She smiled this sweet, venomous smile. She asked about the deed to the house, suggested transferring it into my father's name, or, better yet, into a family trust Brandon controlled. For tax purposes, of course. She asked questions that were probing, not polite, trying to find the weakest points in my empire. It was like watching a predator chart a path before it strikes, and I was the prey. And the crazy thing, she wasn't subtle about it. Every word, every glance, every small nod was calculated. She wanted access, control. She viewed my lack of a husband, my unmarried state, my single life not as a personal choice, but as a weakness to exploit. And she fed Brandon's worst impulses, convinced him that my money was his birthright, that I owed him, that he deserved it. It wasn't about a wedding. It wasn't about gratitude. It was about bleeding me dry, all while convincing themselves it was perfectly normal. And in that moment, I realized the depth of betrayal, not just from them, but from the system I had built for them, the sacrifices I had made. Every time I bailed Victor out, every time I signed for Brandon's loft, every time I covered their deposits and debts, they had absorbed it as entitlement. It wasn't love they felt, it was expectation. And now, Lydia had entered the equation, fanning the flames, making it acceptable in Brandon's mind to expect more, to demand more, to take without conscience. It hit me that evening, lying on the sofa, recovering from pneumonia, wedding invoices stacked in my lap. I had been paralyzed with shock, stunned by the voicemail in Brandon's call earlier. But slowly, a different kind of clarity emerged. I understood that they weren't just taking advantage, they were planning my financial execution. I sat there with the folder, staring, letting the pieces fall into place. This wasn't just a wedding they wanted paid for. This was a test, a setup, a way to gauge how far I could be manipulated. And they had no idea that I was the executioner they were trusting. That realization, it was cold, precise, and electrifying. For 2 hours, I just sat, letting the horror of the betrayal settle, mutating into something I could channel. This wasn't personal anger anymore. It was strategy. I looked around my home office the next day, the room lined with the mahogany bookshelves, monitors tracking global shipping routes, and the framed first dollar my company ever earned. Everything I had built, every piece of infrastructure supporting their lives, was mine. I bypassed all the small details and went straight to the fireproof safe. 3 thick red folders, one for the house, one for Brandon's loft, one for the wedding. The house, paid for years ago, bought outright in a shell LLC under my control. Brandon's loft, leased under my guarantee, rent automatically drafted from my corporate account. The wedding, contracts personally signed, $100,000 in deposits, all points of leverage in my hands. They had assumed endless access, and they had assumed I would comply. But suddenly, I saw the entire picture clearly. I had the power, I had the cards, I could act. And it wasn't just about money, it was about reclaiming respect, autonomy, dignity. I picked up the phone, dialing my attorney, a man who had known me and my family dynamic for 8 years. Every word to him was deliberate. This was personal. This was precise. Check the structures, run the investigations, uncover every detail on Lydia, every misstep by Victor. I needed the truth in hand, ready to act over the next 48 hours. I transformed, recovering physically, sharpening mentally. The fever and weakness receded. The cough subsided. I was no longer the sick, pathetic woman they thought they could bully. I was the strategist, the one holding all the power. And as I stood there, looking at those red folders, the years of sacrifice and betrayal converged into a singular moment of realization. I could take control. I could turn every ounce of trust, every act of generosity, every silent bailout into leverage. And I would, because they thought I was compliant, kind, and weak, and they had no idea who they had really underestimated. The next couple of days were intense, in a way I hadn't expected. I knew I couldn't just sit there and stew in anger. That would be useless. I had to rebuild myself, even if just a little at a time. Physically, I forced myself to eat, to drink water, to take my antibiotics with precision. Every sip, every bite was deliberate. My body, weakened from pneumonia, responded slowly, but it responded. I can feel the fever finally leaving, the ache in my chest softening, and with each moment, the fog that had clouded my mind began to lift. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was preparing mentally. I started running through the details of my life, the infrastructure I had built that they all assumed was theirs for the taking. The house, the loft, the wedding deposits, all of it. And suddenly, a strategy began to form. I got up, wrapped in a blanket, and walked down the long, quiet hallway to my home office. The room felt different now, somehow sharper, almost charged with purpose, lined with mahogany bookshelves, monitors tracking global shipping routes, and the framed first dollar my company had ever earned. The office was a physical manifestation of everything I had accomplished, and it was all mine, every bit of it. I bypassed the smaller details of the day, the emails, the spreadsheets, and went straight for the fireproof safe in the corner. The metal door was heavy, cold under my fingers, the clicks of the dial echoing in the silence. Click, click, clack. And then, the safe swung open. Rows of meticulously organized files, the evidence of a lifetime of hard work, sacrifices, and strategic planning lay before me. I pulled 3 specific red folders from the bottom drawer, each one carefully labeled and maintained. The first was the deed to the house Victor currently lived in. He had spent years boasting about hosting neighborhood meetings, parading around as master of the manor, but he had forgotten one crucial detail. The house wasn't his. 10 years ago, when the bank was days away from foreclosing, I had stepped in. I hadn't just paid the mortgage, I bought the house outright through a shell LLC that I completely controlled. Legally speaking, Victor was my month-to-month tenant, and yet he had never known, or had conveniently ignored, that I held all the power. The second folder contained the lease agreement for Brandon's Florida loft. He had claimed to his friends that his lifestyle was funded by his art, but the lease, signed by me, ensured that if I pulled the plug, he'd be out in 30 days. And the third folder, the wedding file, $100,000 in deposits, all contracts signed under my authority, every vendor tied directly to me. They thought my money was endless, that they had unlimited access. They hadn't realized that I owned the infrastructure of their entire lives. Sitting at my massive oak desk, I flipped through the folders, reading every detail, reaffirming in my mind the control I held. I could see it all laid out like a chessboard. Every property, every lease, every deposit was a piece I could move. And the best part, they had no idea. Their assumption of entitlement had blinded them completely. I was not just angry, I was in control. For the first time since falling ill, I felt the rush of empowerment that came from knowing I was no longer vulnerable. I wasn't just a victim of their greed. I was the architect of their potential downfall. I reached for the phone, my fingers steady now, and dialed Harrison, my corporate attorney, a man as sharp and relentless as any bulldog you could imagine. Sophia, his voice boomed through the speaker. He sounded surprised at first, probably expecting me to still be bedridden, but I didn't waver. My voice was calm, eerily devoid of the raspiness from pneumonia. "This isn't about the Tokyo shipment," I said. "This is personal. I need you to review the ownership structure of the LLC holding the Elm Street property and the lease guarantees for Brandon's loft. I need them airtight. I want to be able to terminate both agreements at a moment's notice." I could hear the rapid clicking of keys as he pulled up the information. "Done," he said. "Everything is airtight. You can pull the plug whenever you want." That was the first confirmation I needed. Every detail, every legal angle, perfectly aligned with the plan I was forming. And then the second part, the private investigator. Harrison knew what I wanted without me having to spell it all out. The firm we had used for background checks on warehouse managers last year had the skills to dig deep, to unearth every detail of someone's financial and personal history. "I need a full dive on Lydia," I said. "Tax returns, credit card debt, lawsuits, past relationships, everything. And a secondary check on my father. I need to know exactly how he's been using the allowance I send him every month." There was a pause on the line, a moment where I could feel Harrison gauging the weight of what I was asking. "Sophia," he said gently, "are you sure about this? Once you open this door, you can't unsee what's inside." I didn't hesitate. My eyes locked on the deed to my father's house. "I've already seen enough," I said. "Just get it done. I need the information before Saturday. The wedding is on Saturday." And with that, the plan was in motion. Over the next 48 hours, I became a machine of precision and control. I forced myself to eat, to rest, to regain every bit of physical strength I had lost. The cough that had racked my body subsided. The fever vanished, and for the first time in days, I could stand without feeling like I might collapse. And mentally, I was sharper than I had been in years. The invoices, the property deeds, the lease agreements, they weren't just documents anymore. They were tools, leverage, power. Each piece of paper was a step in the strategy. A line in the blueprint of reclaiming control from the people who had thought they could walk all over me. Sitting there, reviewing everything meticulously, I realized how much I had underestimated my own strength. Being sick had stripped away the illusions, the politeness, the worry about appearances. All that remained was clarity and determination. I was no longer just the sister, the caretaker, the silent supporter. I was the one in command. By the time I set down the folders, I was transformed. The vulnerability, the fever, the exhaustion, they hadn't gone unnoticed, but they had been replaced by a deliberate, calculated strength. I had mapped out every move, anticipated every reaction, and prepared every detail. I could see the ripple effects, the dominoes that would fall when I finally acted. And I smiled, a small, tight smile. Because for the first time, the fear and weakness that had once held me captive were gone. I was ready, fully, completely ready. And they didn't even know it yet. I walked into the bistro, and there they were, Brandon and Lydia sitting in the corner booth. Lydia was completely absorbed in photographing her latte from every angle, ignoring Brandon, who was scrolling through his phone like nothing mattered. I slid into the seat across from them, and Brandon looked up, eyebrows raised. "Wow, you look intense." "Feeling better," he said. I gave a small, calm smile. "Much better," I replied, folding my hands on the table, letting the weight of my gaze speak before I even opened my mouth. Lydia finally looked up, setting her phone down with an almost imperceptible sigh. She gave me a tight, polite smile, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. "Sophia, so glad you could make it," she said, her tone carefully measured. "The vendors have been really aggressive, and well, it's tacky of them to demand payment right now. If you could just write the check, I can get it over to them." She slid a fresh manila folder toward me and tapped it lightly with her manicured nail. I didn't even glance at it. I kept my eyes on her, letting her sense that I was in control, calm and fully aware. "I've reviewed the invoices, Lydia," I said slowly, my voice soft but firm. "The total is higher than we originally discussed, but that's not the point right now." A subtle shift crossed her face, a flicker of unease. She leaned forward slightly. "Oh, then, what do you want to discuss?" she asked, her tone now sharper, a bit defensive. I paused, letting the air thicken between us. "The house," I said simply. "Victor's house, the one I own." Brandon's expression changed immediately, confusion and alarm mixing in his eyes. "What about it? Dad said you were going to transfer it into a family trust after the wedding, to protect it for all of us. That was his idea." I met his gaze steadily, voice calm, almost conversational. "I've done some estate planning while I was sick," I said, letting the words land. "I've decided against it. The house will stay solely in my LLC. In fact, I've scheduled a professional appraisal for next Tuesday. I'm even considering selling it." The silence that followed was almost deafening. You could hear the low hum of the bistro, but it felt distant. Brandon stared, processing, mouth slightly open, and Lydia's composure shattered instantly. The polite, polished bride was gone. She leaned forward, voice dropping to a hiss, and glared at me. "Are you insane? You can't sell that house. Victor lives there, and Brandon and I were planning to move in once he downsizes. It's family property." I didn't flinch. I kept my tone level, calm, precise. "It is not family property, Lydia. It's my property. I paid the foreclosure. I pay the taxes. I handle the landscaping. It's part of my portfolio. And you are being incredibly selfish." The flush on her face deepened, and her posture stiffened. She realized that what she had assumed would be hers, what she had manipulated them into thinking would be hers, was now firmly out of reach. Brandon finally found his voice. "Soph, what is going on? Why are you doing this now? Dad's going to have a heart attack." I stood slowly, letting my presence dominate the table. "I am simply securing my assets, Brandon," I said, calm but firm. I didn't touch the folder of invoices. I looked down at the two of them, seeing the truth clearly. They were parasites, and I was done with being compliant. "I suggest you tell Victor about the appraisal. He should probably start looking for a smaller apartment," I added, voice steady, unyielding. As I turned to leave, Lydia grabbed her phone in desperation, dialing Victor. I pushed open the door and stepped into the crisp air, feeling a small, genuine smile touch my lips for the first time in days. Their panic was palpable, and it was only the beginning. They had assumed control over my life and my resources, but they hadn't considered one thing: I had regained my strength, my clarity, and my power. I walked out knowing the balance had shifted entirely, and the game had just begun. The wedding day arrived, and I wasn't supposed to be there, explicitly told not to attend. But here's the thing: if you're financing the entire event, uninvited doesn't really apply. Right? I dressed carefully, wearing a tailored charcoal gray pantsuit, the kind I wore to board meetings. Not a pastel dress, not a frilly bridesmaid gown. I wanted to be seen, but I wanted control, not celebration. The moment I stepped through the heavy mahogany doors of the Grand Plaza Hotel, the sheer scale of the extravagance hit me. Towering centerpieces of white orchids on every table, crystal chandeliers, string quartets playing softly in the corner, and waiters gliding around with silver trays. My heart raced, but not with panic anticipation. I knew exactly what was about to happen. I slipped to the back of the ballroom, near the double doors, and watched. Brandon and Lydia were at the sweetheart table, Lydia in a custom beaded gown that must have cost more than most people make in a year. Brandon looking exhausted, but dutifully smiling for the photographers. The guests were chatting, glasses clinking. Then the toasts began. My father, Victor, practically leapt out of his chair. His rented tuxedo jacket tightened over his chest, flushed with whiskey and attention. He grabbed the microphone, eyes twinkling with that condescending glee I knew so well. He started with the usual speeches about legacy, family, success, and then he couldn't resist. Oh no, he needed a punchline. He locked eyes with the golf buddies at the front, smug, cruel smile spreading across his face. "Now we all know my daughter, Sophia C., wouldn't be up here today," he boomed. My stomach twisted. I stayed in the shadows. He continued, dripping with condescension. "She's a bit different from the rest of us. Not married, not educated, didn't even finish her sophomore year. But hey, at least she's good for a check." The crowd roared, raucous laughter, belly deep, echoing off the vaulted ceilings. I caught Brandon staring at his plate, refusing to meet anyone's eye. He didn't defend me. He didn't stop the laughter. My chest tightened, but the cold, calculated part of me kicked in. I stepped forward. Click, click, click my heels on the marble, cutting through the fading laughter. Whispers rippled. Heads turn. Victor's smile faltered instantly. Terror replaced arrogance. His hand, still gripping the microphone, dropped. I approached, calm, eyes locked on his. I took the microphone from his trembling hand. He didn't resist. He couldn't. I faced the crowd, the room so silent that the air conditioning hum sounded like a jet engine. I scanned the faces of the country club members, the extended family, and then Victor. And then I spoke. My voice steady, amplified, no tremor. You know what? Victor. I paused, letting it sink in. You're absolutely right. I am not family. I am just your wallet. The collective gasp was immediate. I turned toward the sweetheart table where Brandon and Lydia sat frozen. I locked eyes with Lydia. Oh, Lydia, I said, calm, deadly calm. And that $100,000 wedding gift I promised, forget it, it's canceled. A fork dropped somewhere in the back. Clink, echoing like a gunshot. Lydia's face contorted, rage and disbelief replacing her curated blushing bride persona. She screamed, shrill, no microphone needed. You can't do that. The vendors, the caterer, they haven't been paid, they'll sue you. I smiled lightly, almost kindly. They won't be suing me, I said. I canceled my corporate card authorizations an hour ago. All liability falls to the names on the marriage certificate. Best of luck with that. Gasps and murmurs flowed through the room. The chaos was intoxicating. The expansion of the narrative demanded full disclosure. So I continued. I laid out every truth, every betrayal. Victor, who loves to boast about early retirement, doesn't own a single brick of the house he lives in. I bought it out of foreclosure 10 years ago. I own it. And as of yesterday, he has been served a 30-day eviction notice. His cars, leveraged with title loans, country club dues, paid by my uneducated bank account. The ride is officially over. Victor made a strangled, choking sound, hands clutching his chest, face purple. The golf buddies who had been laughing now stared in disbelief, eyes wide, mouths agape. I turned back to Brandon and Lydia. Brandon's eyes were wide, horrified, fixated on Lydia. I lowered my voice, dangerous and precise. And to my beautiful new sister-in-law, whom I had investigated yesterday by a private firm, Lydia. You're $75,000 in credit card debt. You have no business marrying my brother. Furthermore, this is your third engagement in 4 years. The previous 2 fiancés sued you for draining their joint accounts weeks before the weddings. You targeted my family because you thought it was a bigger payday, and you thought my brother had access to my company. You thought wrong. Lydia lunged forward, knocking over a crystal water goblet that shattered on the floor. Shut up, Brandon. Don't listen to her. She's lying. She's forging documents. But Brandon wasn't looking at me. He was staring at Lydia, the panic and sheer desperation overtaking her features. He remembered the folder on my desk, the lawsuits he refused to read. The illusion shattered. I stepped away from the microphone, letting my words cut through the hysteria. I am stepping away. Brandon, if you stay with her, you pay the rent on that loft yourself. You pay for this wedding yourself. I am entirely, permanently done. Brandon looked at his father, who was sputtering, grasping for support. Lydia frantically checked her frozen bank accounts. Brandon reached up, unpinned the expensive white orchid from his tuxedo lapel, let it drop, and walked away. Silent, no words. Down the center aisle, past staring guests, past Victor's hyperventilating form. and out the heavy doors. Lydia let out a piercing scream, throwing a silver serving tray onto the floor. I placed the microphone on the nearest table, smoothed out my jacket, and walked out the same doors. The downfall was absolute. Vendors realized my American Express was no longer backing the wedding and descended on Lydia with brutal efficiency. Liability waivers meant she was personally responsible for nearly $80,000 in unpaid fees. Combined with the investigators' findings, bankruptcy followed immediately. Victor tried a lawyer, claimed squatters' rights. Harrison, my corporate bulldog, crushed the frivolous lawsuit in one afternoon. Moving trucks arrived 30 days later, and Victor was forced into a tiny one-bedroom apartment outside the city, country club membership permanently revoked. 2 weeks later, I was in my sunlit living room, coffee in hand, reviewing a new European shipping contract when the doorbell rang. I didn't need cameras to know who it was. Brandon stood on the porch, no designer clothes, just simple jeans and a plain t-shirt. Tired, humbled, ashamed, I moved out of the loft. He said quietly, "I handed the keys to the landlord this morning. I didn't want them to evict me." I stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come in, Brandon." He followed me inside, shoulders slumped, hands wrapped around a coffee mug I pushed toward him. Silence, except for the ticking of the wall clock. "I read the file," he whispered, voice cracking. "After the reception, I went to your office. I sat at your desk, and I read everything. The lawsuits, the debts, all of it. Tears brimming." He looked at me. "Soph, I am so sorry for Lydia, for everything. For letting Dad talk to you like that, for taking your money and acting like I deserved it. I was so blind, so entitled." I leaned against the counter. The anger that had fueled my revenge now replaced with exhaustion and a small glimmer of hope. "I contributed to it, Brandon," I said softly. "I made it too easy for you. I thought throwing money at the problem was love. It wasn't. It crippled you." He nodded, wiped his eyes. "It's nothing glamorous," he said. "But I'm working, paying my own way, and I'll never take another dime from you. I just want my sister back if you can forgive me." I offered a small, genuine smile. "You have your sister, Brandon, but the wallet is permanently closed." Over the next months, my life transformed, freed from the toxic burden of family dependence. My company grew internationally. I traveled for pleasure, bought art I loved, and finally reclaimed my assets, dignity, and peace of mind. The uneducated, unmarried workaholic had set a trap they never saw coming, and in doing so, finally set herself free. The fallout from the wedding unfolded faster than anyone could have imagined, and yet it was oddly satisfying to watch it all play out. Lydia, who had seemed so untouchable, crumbled almost instantly. When the vendors realized that my corporate cards were no longer backing the event, they descended on her with ruthless efficiency. Every unpaid invoice, every deposit she thought was covered, every liability waiver she had signed suddenly became her responsibility. Nearly $80,000 in catering, floral, and venue fees were now her problem. And combined with the private investigator's report, bankruptcy was inevitable. Her carefully curated image, the social media persona she had built over years, evaporated overnight. No more Instagram perfect latte shots, no more flawless poses, Instead, she was confronted with process servers, creditors, and the harsh reality of her mismanagement and deceit. The panic on her face was unmistakable, and for a fleeting moment, I felt a strange mix of vindication and relief. She had thought she could manipulate everyone and walk away with a payday, but now her empire of illusions was collapsing in real time. Victor's situation was even more humiliating. For years, he had relied on me, on my wealth, my stability, my silent compliance to fund his lifestyle and maintain appearances. Every country club fee, every classic car restoration, every round of expensive liquor had been silently supported by me. Now, stripped of my safety net, he was forced to face consequences he had never imagined. He hired a lawyer to claim squatters' rights, trying to assert ownership of the house he had boasted about for a decade. But Harrison, my attorney and longtime ally, dismantled the frivolous lawsuit in a single afternoon. Victor's arrogance dissolved completely as reality set in. His desperate, pleading voicemails begging for a month, a loan, another chance to save his cars went unanswered. I blocked his number. The moving trucks arrived on the 30th day, and he was forced to relocate to a cramped one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of the city. His country club membership was revoked for non-payment. The privileges he had taken for granted stripped away in one swift motion. For the first time, he had to live without the constant safety net I had provided for decades. And Brendan was perhaps the most painful to watch. The golden child, the one I had protected and enabled, was forced to confront the consequences of his own entitlement. 2 weeks after the wedding chaos, I was in my sunlit living room, reviewing a new European shipping contract, when the doorbell rang. I didn't even check the cameras. I knew who it was. Brandon stood on the porch, entirely different from the confident, pampered image I had known for years. Gone were the designer clothes, replaced by simple jeans and a plain t-shirt. His posture slumped, his eyes tired, humbled, ashamed. "I moved out of the loft," he said quietly, voice low. "I handed the keys to the landlord this morning. I know you canceled the lease guarantee. I didn't want them to have to evict me." I stepped aside, opening the door wider. "Come in, Brandon." He entered, shoulders heavy, and followed me into the kitchen. He wrapped his hands around the mug of coffee I pushed toward him, seeking comfort, some small connection amidst the fallout. For a long moment, the only sound was the ticking of the wall clock, and then he spoke, voice breaking. "I read the file," he whispered. "After the reception, I went to your office. I sat at your desk. I read everything, the lawsuits, the debts, the financial records, everything you tried to warn me about." His eyes glistened with tears. "Soph, I am so sorry. Not just for Lydia, for everything. For letting Dad talk to you like that. For taking your money and acting like I deserved it. For calling you uneducated when you sacrificed your entire future to keep a roof over our heads. I was blind. I was entitled. I let them convince me you were just a resource." Watching him, seeing him stripped of all that entitlement and finally acknowledging the truth, I felt a weight lift from me. It wasn't just vindication, it was closure. The brother I had loved, protected, and yes, sometimes enabled, was finally seeing the reality of the manipulation and greed that had surrounded him. I leaned against the counter, exhaustion mingling with a subtle sense of triumph. The anger that had driven me through months of planning and preparation melted into a reflective calm. "I contributed to it, Brandon," I said softly, letting each word settle. "I made it too easy for you. I thought throwing money at the problem was love. It wasn't. It crippled you." He nodded, wiping his eyes, and spoke again, voice steadier now. "It's nothing glamorous," he admitted. "Just an entry-level job at a local printing firm. But I pay for it myself. I rented a small studio apartment. I never want another dime from you. I just want my sister back, if you can forgive me." And I did forgive him. I offered a small, genuine smile. "You have your sister, Brandon," I said, voice warm, steady, reassuring. "But the wallet is permanently closed." He let out a watery laugh and nodded emphatically. "I know, and I'm glad." With Brandon finally stepping into reality and accepting responsibility for his choices, I felt the last chains of the past decade dissolve. The financial, emotional, and psychological burdens of my father's recklessness, Brandon's entitlement, and Lydia's manipulation were lifted completely. I could breathe again. The sense of relief was profound, like the first deep inhalation after holding my breath for far too long. Over the following months, my life transformed in ways that I had only dared imagine during sleepless nights of stress and calculation. Freed from the weight of toxic expectations, my logistics company thrived. I expanded into international markets, opening offices in London and Tokyo, and regained full control over every aspect of my business. Travel became a pleasure, not an obligation. Art was purchased because I loved it, not because I felt compelled to fund the illusions and vanity of others. My life was mine, in the truest sense. The liberation was deeper than just finances or career. It was personal. For years, I had built an empire only to hand the keys to people who resented me. Now, I reclaimed my assets, my dignity, and my peace of mind. I was no longer the uneducated, unmarried workaholic my family had dismissed. I had set a trap they never saw coming, and in doing so, I had finally freed myself from the chains of their entitlement, manipulation, and greed. The control, the clarity, the power I'd regained wasn't just about money or revenge. It was about finally living life on my own terms. Every contract I signed, every shipment I approved, every decision I made reinforced that I was the architect of my own life. And the relief, the satisfaction, the freedom that followed was absolute, profound, and deeply empowering. I was, at last, free. So, that's how it all went down. What started as betrayal and humiliation turned into complete control, freedom, and honestly, a little poetic justice. I reclaimed my life, my assets, and my peace of mind. And the lesson: never underestimate what someone who's been pushed too far can do. If you love this story of strategy, revenge, and empowerment, stick around. There's more like this coming. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss a single twist or turn.